G'day guys, how are we? Welcome to a special edition of the Boxing Deep Dive Show. Today, in this episode, I'm going to go over the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters of the 21st century. Now, whenever I do these specials, it's always fraught with a little bit of danger because no matter what happens, we're always going to upset a certain demographic or a fan base, so I get that. And also the fact that it's for the 21st century, not of all time. So there's some fighters have actually had the crossover between the 90s and the 2000s. So what I'm going to do is go through the top 10 and then have some honourable mentions and just a little bit of an explanation of why I've gone with who I have and why I haven't chosen certain fighters and I've chosen others. So and then afterwards, of course, I'm sure in the comment section down below, you will have your say and let me know all about your thoughts, whether you agree or I don't know shit about boxing. It'll be one or the other or maybe a little bit in between. So, as I said, I've got the top 10. I'm going to go through the records of the 2000s. So it's not their overall record. This is purely based on the year 2000 onwards. And then there's a little bit of explanation about the best wins, some of the losses, and just a general career that they had. So, and also the amount of world title fights that they actually went through. Now, I've got to say, this was extremely hard. There's a few fighters that were very, very unlucky not to make the cut, but you can only choose 10. You can't choose 15. So these are going to be my number 10. I'm going to start at 10 and work my way down to number 1. And we'll see how we go. So let's get started. Fingers crossed we don't muck this up and I upset a lot of you fans out there. So let's start with number 1. This is the Puerto Rican great Miguel Cotto. His record was 41-6. 33 knockouts, 26 world title fights, and wins over the likes of Randall Bailey, Paulie Malignaggi, Zab Judah, Shane Mosley, Joshua Clottey, Antonio Margarito in the rematch. Of course, he had the controversial first fight with Margarito as well, so we're going to put a bit of an asterisk beside that loss. Sergio Martinez and our very own Daniel Gill. So they're probably the biggest wins. There's probably a couple others in there as well, of course, but they're probably the biggest wins of his career that I think. As I said, he also had the loss to Antonio Margarito by that controversial 10th round stoppage. He was also stopped by Manny Pacquiao in 12 rounds in what was a great fight. Lost a 12-round decision to Floyd Mayweather. I thought he actually did very well in that fight. And probably his later losses to Austin Trout, Canelo Alvarez, which was another pretty good effort from Miguel Cotto, and his final fight, which was a 12-round loss to Saddam Ali. So Miguel Cotto, number 10. Let's go to number 9. I've gone for the English great this time, Joe Calzaghe. Now, undefeated in the 2000s, 19-0, 9 knockouts, 17 world title fights, and he lost to the he didn't lose, he beat the likes of Jeff Lacey, Sakio Bickart, Mikhail Kessler, Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones Jr., even though they were a little bit later in his career. Now, a lot of you out there might argue he could have been a little bit higher than number 9, but the fact that he beat Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. later very late in their careers and towards the end of his own career, but 19-0, 9 knockouts. So that's probably the reason why he wasn't ranked a little bit higher. As I said, I know some of you out there will have him higher than this, but for me, number 9 for Joe Calzaghe. To number 8, again, this might be a little bit controversial. Some of you might have him a lot higher. I've got Naoya Inoue, 25-0, 22 KOs, 20 world title fights, multi-division world champion, just like Miguel Cotto was, by the way. I did mention that earlier. Probably his biggest wins, Adrian Hernandez, Emmanuel Rodriguez, Nonito Donaire, Jason Maloney, and of course, just most recently, Stephen Fulton. So he's probably, again, not as high as maybe he could be in some of your opinions. The reason is because I still think he's got a fair bit of his career to go, even though he has had the 25 knockouts and, as I said, has unified a couple of divisions. I just think he probably needs a couple of more sort of bigger scalps. Whether they're out there or not, we'll see. But at the moment, ability-wise and performance-wise, you certainly can't debate the fact that in a way he's in the top 10 or could even be higher. But for me, even though he has got some really good wins on his resume, I still think the best is yet to come from Naoya Inoue. And at the moment, I've got him as our number 8 fighter. Let's go to number 7. I have an all-time great, of course, and still going. Vasyl Lomachenko, the Ukrainian Matrix, 17-3, 11 knockouts during the 2016 world title fights. Of course, he had that loss to Orlando Salidos, I think, in his second fight, so a little bit early for him. But look, he won the world title, I think, a fight or two after that. He's beaten the likes of Gary Russell, Nicholas Walters, Guillermo Rigondeaux, Jorge Linares, Luke Campbell, Richard Comey. Of course, he's had the loss against Teofimo Lopez and also the most recent disputed loss to Devin Haney. But especially in those mid sort of 2010s, almost unbeatable was Vasyl Lomachenko, and I've got him at number 7. Now, he's only had the 20 fights. Could have fought a lot more often, but yeah, that might have got him a little bit higher. Definitely, probably like an inner way, ability-wise, definitely should probably be higher. But I've just got to go on the the portfolio of work as well. And even though he has had some really good wins in there, again, like in a way, probably just hasn't had that real signature win to really elevate him into that top sort of 3 or 4 fighters. So for me, Vasyl Lomachenko, number 7. Number 6, and again, this might be a little bit controversial. Bernard Hopkins, of course, he did a lot of his best work in the 90s, but in the 2000s, he was 19-6 with 1 draw, 1 no contest, 5 KOs, had 20 world title fights in the 2000s. And even though they were probably a little bit past their best, he did still beat Felix Trinidad, Oscar De La Hoya, great win over Antonio Tarver, Winky Wright, Kelly Pavlich, avenged the loss to Roy Jones Jr., even though that was a lot later than the first time they met, and Jean Pascal. He had the 2 losses to Jermaine Taylor. No disgrace in that. Lots of great fighters have lost to opponent twice. I think back to Shane Mosley, of course. Joe Calzaghe, he lost to Chad Dawson, Sergey Kovalov, and of course Joe Smith. Actually, he didn't lose to Chad Dawson. I apologise for that. But he lost to Taylor twice, Calzaghe, Kovalev, and Joe Smith. So, as I said, 19-6-1, 20 world title fights. So for me, still did enough to come in at number 6. On to number 5, and I'm sure this will cause some debate. Andre Ward, a lot of people might have him a lot higher. He was 32-0, 16 knockouts, 9 world title fights. That's probably the thing that probably just held him back a little bit for me. Only the 9 title fights, even though he did beat Mikhail Kessler, Sakio Bika, Arthur Abraham, Carl Froch, Chad Dawson, Sergey Kovalev ×2. So an unbelievably great fighter. And as I said, you probably could have him a little bit higher based on his overall skill set. But again, only the 9 world title fights just put him back a little bit against some of the others who have had 2 or 3 times as many world title fights and wins as Andre Ward. So number 5 for me, Andre, son of God, Ward. What a fighter he was. So on to the top 4. Another active fighter, Terence Bud Crawford, 40-0, still going, of course, 31 knockouts. At this stage, it's had 18 world title fights and big wins, the likes of Ricky Burns, Yuri Gamboa, Jeff Horn, Amir Khan, Cal Brook, Sean Porter, and of course the most recent win of his career, the biggest of his career, the 9th round stoppage of Errol Spence Jr. And who knows what might happen with Terence Crawford. With prospective fights against maybe Canelo, Charlo, Tim Tszyu, maybe the rematch with Spence. But at this stage, I've just got him at number 4 and possibly still climbing, because the guy I've got at number 3 could be in his near future. And of course, I'm referring to Saul Canelo Alvarez. Now, in the 2000s, look at this record, 59-2-2, 39 KOs, 23 world title fights, multi-division champion, multi-undisputed weight world champion. There's so many great wins on his record, but along the likes of Shane Mosley, Erislandy Lara, Miguel Cotto, Amir Khan, Liam Smith, had the 3 fights to Gennady Golovkin, of course, Danny Jacobs, Sergey Kovalev, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, had the losses to Floyd Mayweather and Dmitry Bivol. But what an unbelievable fighter. Arguably the greatest Mexican of all time. Me personally, I've still got one Julio Cesar Chavez as number 1, but Canelo Alvarez for me is number 2. So 59-2-2, 39 KOs. 154, 160, 168, and 175 weight champion. What an unbelievable fighter Canelo Alvarez has been. And according to him, still has 3 or 4 years left in him. So we'll see how we go. So on to the top two. Probably not a lot of surprise who they are. Probably the order might cause a little bit of debate. But for me, I've got the one and only Pac-Man, Manny Pacquiao. In the 2000s, went 35, 6 and 2, 20 KOs, 24 world title fights. A couple of those losses too were heavily debated. We won't get into that now. It's for another time. But great fights against the likes of Marco Antonio Barrera, Juan Manuel Marquez, Eric Morales, Oscar De La Hoya, Ricky Hatton, Miguel Cotto, Antonio Margarito, Shane Mosley, Timothy Bradley, Adrian Broner, Keith Thurman, of course. The losses also to Floyd Mayweather, the disputed decision to Jeff Horn, and the other one to Bradley as well, and finish up with that loss to Yadenis Ugas. But what a fighter this guy has been, and arguably number two to our number one fighter, which probably no surprise here, the one and only Floyd Money Mayweather, 28 and 0 during the 2000s. 9 knockouts, so not a lot of knockouts on his record, but he was that type of fighter. Didn't need a lot of knockouts. He just outclassed so many opponents. 24 world title fights, undefeated. And I'll just go through some of his resume there. Diego Corrales, Jose Luis Castillo ×2, Arturo Gatti, Zab Judah, Oscar De La Hoya, Ricky Hatton, Juan Manuel Marquez, Shane Mosley, Miguel Cotto, Canelo Alvarez, Marcus Medina ×2, and of course Manny Pacquiao. I'm not going to put Conor McGregor in there because he doesn't deserve to be. He's not a great boxer. UFC might be a different story, but so they're probably the biggest fights of his career. But for me, I know there's going to be some debate over whether Pacquiao or Mayweather should be number one, but for me, it's clear cut. And I know there was talk. I mean, the thing with Floyd Mayweather, everyone will go through his resume and pick a reason why he's not as great as he says he is. Of course, he TBE, the best ever. But you cannot dispute his record. And I know there's always talk about when he's fought particular opponents and other opponents he hasn't fought at all, or fought them later on, whatever it might be. All great fighters of any era could be guilty of exactly the same thing. You pick any fighter and you could probably pick through their record and do similar things. Floyd Mayweather, at the end of the day, has beaten each and every great fighter of his generation. And yes, some of them might have been questionable or whatever it might be. I just look back to when he beat Canelo Alvarez. Everyone said Canelo Alvarez was too young. He was a world champion at the time and had 40-odd fights. Mayweather was 36. The Pacquiao thing, for me, I think if they fought 10 times, Floyd Mayweather beats Pacquiao 10 times. That's just me, and I'm sure I'll get some feedback about that. But for me, Floyd Money Mayweather is the undisputed king of the 21st century. Now to some honourable mentions. Now, I'm sure everyone's out there thinking, why didn't he pick this fighter or that fighter? I'm going to start with one or a couple that were really, really stiff to miss out. I'm going to start with Gennady Golovkin. He went 42-2-1, 37 KOs, had 25 world title fights. The problem with Triple G, didn't have that signature win that all the other fighters have had. Yes, he beat Daniel Geale, David Lemieux, Cal Brook, Danny Jacobs. Yes, I get that, and the disputed fights with Canelo Alvarez. But the bottom line is he didn't have that signature win to really put the exclamation point on his career, and that's why I've had to leave him out. The other one I thought, well, there's a couple, but one of the main ones was Nonito Donaire. He went 42-8 with 28 KOs, had 23 world title fights. Beat, of course, Victor Chinian, Jorge Arce, Nicholas Walters, and had countless other wars. But again, didn't really have the Mayweather to the Pacquiao or the De La Hoya to the Mayweather or whatever it might be. But again, a very, very honourable mention. Another one there, I had, what was it? I'll just go through there. The likes of Roy Jones Jr., 26-9, 14 KOs, 12 world title fights. Beat in the 2000s John Ruiz, Antonio Tarver, Felix Trinidad, but they were sort of later on in his career. His best work was, of course, done in the 90s. Also, and you can see that I had like 9 losses in the 2000s. So that's probably why I've excluded him. Felix Trinidad, 6-4. So he had 10 fights, 5 knockouts, only 5 world title fights again. His best work was done in the 90s, even though he did beat David Reed, Fernando Vargas, William Joppy, Ricardo Mayorga. Just didn't have those wins in the 2000s that he had in the 90s. Tyson Fury, 33-0-1, 24 KOs, but only has so far the 6 world title fights, which might surprise some people. Of course, he's had the fights with Deontay Wilder, Wladimir Klitschko, and Dillian White, and a few of the others, of course. But at this stage, I still don't think he's got that bodywork to be in there. Alexander Usyk, a fighter whoever wins, if they do fight each other, if it's Fury and Usyk, the winner of that could possibly be considered down the track. He's had 21 fights in the 2000s, 14 KOs, 10 world title fights. But again, apart from the Anthony Joshua wins, hasn't had that massive win just yet. So here's another one that was on the fringes. One, Manuel Marquez, I've got to give a very, very special mention to. He was awfully stiff, but he went 26-5-1 with 15 KOs, 14 world title fights, had the wins over Robbie Peden, Orlando Salido, Marco Antonio Barrera, Casamaya, Juan Diaz, Casillas, Pacquiao. That win over Pacquiao alone might have been enough to get him in, but again, you can only choose 10. He might have been 11 or 12 on the list, so big mention to Juan Manuel Marquez. And just a couple of others, Oscar De La Hoya, 8-5, 5 KOs. So again, best work in the 90s, had 9 world title fights, did beat the likes of Arturo Gatti, Fernando Vargas, Felix Sturm, Ricardo Mayorga, but also suffered 5 losses along the way. So that's probably why he wasn't considered with an 8-5 record. And another one that doesn't get mentioned a lot, but I'm definitely going to give him a mention. It's the fighter of the decade of, I think it was the 2010, was Chris John, the Indonesian great, 34-1-3, 16 KOs. Had 19 world title fights, winning 15 of those. And he did have a win over Juan Manuel Marquez and a couple of great fights with Rocky Juarez. So, look, all those fighters could be in there, but again, I'll say they can only put 10 in there, and I had to make the call. So to rate all the ones I've got, I had number 10, Miguel Cotto, number 9, Joe Calzaghe, number 8, Naoya Inoue, number 7, Vasyl Lomachenko, number 6, Bernard Hopkins, number 5, Andre Ward, number 4, Terence Crawford, number 3, Canelo Alvarez, number 2, Manny Pacquiao, and number 1, Floyd Mayweather Jr. How'd you have it? I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. Be kind in the comments below. Again, it's just my opinion. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just my opinion, but I'm really happy to hear your thoughts. Put your top 10 down below, and we might do a follow-up to this and see what all you guys and girls thought out there. So until next time, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you then.